Okay, I thought today we would talk about a special needs trust because I think it's something that people might have heard about, but they don't really know what it is and who it's for. So if you want to know more about that, just stay tuned. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Scan FYI. Yeah, today we're going to talk about a topic that we've never talked about before, but we've had some requests about special needs trust, and we have the perfect guest to tell us about it. My guest today is from Waypoint Legal. It's David Nathan. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Andrea. Thank you for having me.
Really a pleasure. I think this will be an interesting topic. But before we even go there, David, would you kindly just tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what is Waypoint Legal?
Sure. Again, I'm David Nathan. I'm the CEO and principal attorney for Waypoint Legal. We're a law firm located in central New Jersey, offices in Freehold and Bridgewater. And our goal as elder care attorneys is to be a senior resource center to the aging population. What does that mean? It means everything from providing the basics of like your estate plan, so like a will or a power of attorney or a medical directive, to more advanced planning topics, such as what we're going to be talking about today, which is special needs planning, talking about how we can protect your loved one, protect your aging parents, for example, doing everything from needing to plan for what happens if mom or dad or loved one needs to go into a community like an assisted living or skilled nursing facility. What do you do? Because it can be a very emotionally charged situation, and we deal with that every single day. We hold your hand through the entire process, and that is really what drives us, because we want to be that resource center, and that's what we as the law firm aim to do.
All right, well, very good. Thank you for that. And just, of course, to remind everyone, we've got David's info on the screen. And if you want to reach out to him, all the details of his contact info will be in the description. So I think first, let's just identify, or I should say define, when we say a special needs trust, what is that exactly? See, I'm learning too, everyone. See, I'm asking the questions for you.
So, a special needs trust is a very special kind of construct under the law that looks to, shall I say, protect those people that are disabled or may potentially need assistance with certain aspects of their life in the future. And what I mean by that is the aspects in the future are those that might at some point in the future qualify for what is referred to as governmental assistance. And usually that falls into the line of like Medicaid, for example, because Medicaid has certain very specific financial criteria. Um, Usually the person who is the disabled individual that might qualify for those governmental benefits cannot actually own a certain amount of what is called resources. Resources is money, basically. Okay. And so, in order to afford them the governmental assistance that they are eligible for, while simultaneously being able to provide for them with other things that the government won't pay for, there is this construct called a special needs trust. Okay. And a special needs trust is there's an overarching umbrella. And within that umbrella, there is several different kinds of special needs trusts. Okay. So a special needs trust generally falls into two different categories. And the big thing that defines the two differences is who set up the trust. Sorry, actually three things. Who set up the trust? Whose money is it that's going to go into the trust? And who's the beneficiary? Okay. The last one is easy. The beneficiary is the disabled individual. Okay. The key question when you're setting up a trust is who's setting this up? Is it, for example, the prototypical situation is when a grandparent is looking to set up this trust for the benefit of a disabled grandchild, okay?
Right.
Or a parent looking to set up this trust for the benefit of the disabled child, okay? So it's that parental, that family relationship.
Yes.
That is what's called a third party special needs trust, okay? Third party because it's one person setting it up for the benefit of somebody else, okay? So let's stick with grandma or grandpa who's taking their money and they're putting it into this trust for the benefit of disabled grandchild. Okay. That is what's one type of special needs trust in that situation is what's called a supplemental benefits trust. Okay. It's called a supplemental benefits trust because the key phrase is that this trust is there to supplement
Okay.
and not take the place of governmental benefits. In layman's terms, that means that if the government is paying for something, the trust funds cannot be used to pay for the very same things that the government is going to be paying for that disabled individual. Okay.
Yeah. All right. That
Yeah.
I'm absorbing all of that.
Yeah.
That's a lot right there. But yes. Okay.
Yeah, well, it is complicated stuff. And certainly if, as you had said, Andrea, if anybody had any, more specific granular questions on this topic, like that's why our information is available and we're happy to kind of talk through those things. But oftentimes that supplemental benefits trust is established as part of the bigger estate plan for grandma or grandpa. So what that means is when grandma or grandpa pass away, they might then say, okay, I want Jimmy, just picking a random name, I want, Jimmy to benefit from my estate, but I know that Jimmy being disabled cannot himself own any money or perhaps is not able to actually manage his own finances. So I'm going to put that money into this trust for Jimmy's benefit. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what'll happen then is usually grandma or grandpa's, adult children will be the trustees of that trust for the benefit of little Jimmy. Okay. So obviously there's like a layer that you have to think of, like, okay, who's in charge of this? And there's all these different factors that have to be thought about. But really what's really nice about this, and from a greater protecting the disabled population perspective, is that whatever money is inside this trust that's for the sole benefit of Jimmy, to stick with my person, ultimately when Jimmy passes away many, many years down the road, hopefully, the government, Medicaid, the government cannot turn to the trustees managing this trust and say, hey, we've been paying all these benefits to Jimmy during his lifetime, we want to be reimbursed. They can't do that. All the money in there will be left over for Jimmy's, if Jimmy has siblings, for example, all the remaining money in the trust that was no longer necessary to take care of Jimmy because he's now passed away will be there to benefit the other siblings of Jimmy. So in other words, all the grandchildren will still be able to benefit from what grandma or grandpa set up many, many years ago, which is really nice. Yeah, and that's really a nice little public policy reason for that, because we want people to be charitable for the benefit of disabled individuals. We want them to, as a society, we want to protect, whether that's financially, emotionally, we want to be able to protect those disabled individuals. Okay.
So, let me say this as I'm listening to you, and I know for a lot of people, they're doctor, they're lawyers, Mr. Google out there. And clearly this is not a do-it-yourself situation where you're just going to go on the internet and fill out a form. This is clearly something where you need to see a professional to get this done for you. If you're at all considering why you might want to have a special needs trust, I think you have to consult a professional.
I couldn't agree more, especially because there are certain rules associated with, even when it's that type of trust that I talked about, that supplemental benefits trust, you have to be careful about how that money is spent. You can't take the disabled beneficiaries' own money that they'll be getting. So let's say they get monthly SSI benefits. You can't commingle. So there are still, it's not just some loosey-goosey trust that you can just set up, go to the bank, and then just set it up and you're good to go. There are some very strict rules regardless of what kind of special needs trust is being set up. Some are strict, some are even more strict than others, but nevertheless, you definitely need to walk a tightrope and know what you're doing, not only in the setup of that trust, but also in the actual overseeing and management of that trust too.
So if I totally understand about, the grandparents and the grandchild, because am familiar with some of those situations, a parent, a disabled child, that sort of thing. But what about a husband and a wife? Let's just say, great example, because if you watched in the news about Jay Leno and his wife, okay, with that, because all right, you realize your spouse has Alzheimer's, or something happens, and you have the resources, you want to protect them. You could even do something like this with a spouse.
That is correct. But what's interesting is that at least where we are here in New Jersey views the assets of spouses to be basically accessible to each other. It doesn't, it's what's called spousal deeming. Okay. And
Yeah.
so assuming for our hypothetical that Jay Leno is a New Jersey resident, if Jay was looking to set up a special needs trust for his cognitively impaired wife and wanted to set up this kind of trust, that would actually be called that would actually probably fall into the category of what's called a self-settled special needs trust. And it's called self-settled because the term settled is in reference to the person who creates the trust. That's called the settlor. Okay, a settlor is the creator of that trust. Okay, so where I say self-settled, it's called a self-created trust. Okay, and so what happens in that situation is Jay Leno's wife and Mia culpa, I don't remember her name at the moment.
That's her name. I just remember.
Got it. Yeah. Got it. But what happens in that situation is it's like whether she's able to set it up herself or whether Jay, as her power of attorney, if they were effectively able to sign a power of attorney while she was competent, set up this trust with his or her own money going into it. So she's both the creator, she's both the beneficiary, and it's her own money going into this trust. So it's all the same entity and the same person and the same money going into this, as opposed to our previous example where there was different differentiations of the parties. So with it being a self-settled special needs trust, I'm going to throw out a big number to you right now, and this is the federal code. This under the United States Social Security Act, there's a section called 42 USC 1396 PD4A. Okay. Wow. That shorthand, everyone says D4A trust. A D4A trust is shorthand referencing that code section of the Social Security Act. And basically what that means is if you follow these very, very strict rules that are laid out in that statute, and you set up a trust that follows to the letter that code section, then what happens in that example is that the person would not be considered ineligible for governmental assistance by putting money into this trust. Because by putting money into this trust, Jay's wife in this example, if you didn't follow that rule very specifically, Jay's wife would have been deemed to have gifted away money into this entity that she no longer controls. Except the law, just like the public policy benefits in our other previous example, the public wants to protect the disabled population. So that's what this D4A self-created trust allows for. Okay. And what that does is Jay would be able to manage this trust for the benefit of his wife and can basically, as long as the money in there is exclusively for her benefit, it's what's called a sole benefit trust. It's for the sole benefit of Jay's wife. Okay.
Yes.
And so in that example, she would qualify for governmental benefits. The money in that trust would be there to pay for her sole benefit of whatever she needs, as long as it's not taking the place of whatever Medicaid is covering for her. And we'd then be able to go on for the remainder of our life for her benefit. Now, I talked about how there's very strict rules that have to be followed in regardless of the scenarios. This is the sole benefit trust is probably one of the strictest rule following trust that she has to follow, because Medicaid has the right to audit the account statements of this trust to make sure that the trust is in fact paying only for the sole benefit of the disabled beneficiary, Jay's wife. Okay. So what do I mean by sole benefit? It used to be very strict and, dare I say, draconian, where if the classic example was, let's say Jay's wife was needing a specialist doctor over in California and she's here in New Jersey. And so what they would do twice a year is they would fly from New Jersey to California to go see this doctor. Well, Jay's wife was not capable of flying by herself to these trips, so Jay would accompany her. Jay would use the money in this trust to buy a plane ticket and probably accommodations for his wife, but also himself.
So,
It used to be that that was deemed a violation of the trust,
wow.
as illogical as that would seem, because Jay's wife was not able to take care of herself.
You need an escort, basically.
Correct. And so, but it used to be that that used to get you in trouble with this sole benefits trust, because well, let's say logic doesn't always have a place within the law. But then finally, a few years ago, they actually, under, I think it was the Obama administration, they actually liberalized the rule ever so slightly in terms of what is considered a sole benefit. Okay. And in that example of the plane ticket scenario, which actually was directly referenced when they made this liberalization, they realized that there has to be some level of flexibility to understand that a disabled individual who themselves might be severely disabled there is a level of codependency upon the caregiver who's going to be accompanying them, and that there has to be some level of financial assistance that might be provided to that caregiver who's helping the disabled individual. So at its core, as long as that trust is still for the sole benefit, then it's okay. But the other chief difference with this trust, and I can go on about this, is that with a sole benefit trust like this, when Jay's wife in our hypothetical does eventually pass away, Medicaid is entitled to reimbursement from this trust.
Really?
It's what's called Medicaid clawback, because the idea conceptually is, okay, Medicaid will allow you, Jay's wife, to get onto government assistance while being able to put aside this money into this trust that under normal circumstances, we would require you to completely spend down on your needs. So therefore, we're allowing you during your life to get this government benefit. So therefore, on the back end, when she passes away, Medicaid says, okay, now it's time for us to be reimbursed, because it's also one of the ways that the Medicaid program continues to get funded for other individuals who are in the same circumstance as Jay's wife. So there is actually, it does make sense in that circumstance.
So I think, again, if we're speaking to David Nathan from Waypoint Legal, and we're talking about special needs trust. And I think I'm going to tell you my biggest takeaway is that this can be extremely complex, and everyone who would need a special needs trust is going to have an entirely different situation. It's very personal. It's not a one size fits all. And if you think that this might be something that you or your family should take advantage of, you absolutely must speak to a professional to get this done. Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. We've
Too
only
many
touched the surface.
variables.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once again, all of the info for David Nathan and Waypoint Legal in the description. I encourage you to give him a call if you think this might be the right thing for you. Special Needs Trust. And David, thank you very much for being with me today.
You are so welcome, Andrea. Thank you for having me as a guest.
All right, something interesting that, once again, one of the benefits of Scan FYI, we get to share a lot of great information that you may or may not be familiar with, but very necessary information. So remember out there, if it's important to you, it's important to us. I'm Andrea Tarr. We'll see you next time on Scan FYI. Bye, everyone, and bye, David.
Bye.